Long ago, there existed a particular village where every single person wore black clothing. According to the elders, the village had been cursed to mourn endlessly because of a terrible event that occurred many years earlier. No one dared to put on any other color, not even the children. Newborn babies were wrapped in small black fabrics before they could even utter their first words. Brides walked down the aisle dressed in black. Celebrations and festivals were all carried out in black as well. Even joy itself seemed forced to disguise itself as sorrow in that place. Everything remained this way until the day a beautiful young woman decided to challenge the tradition by wearing a colorful dress. Her name was Wandu, a talented fashion designer who was bold enough to be different. Wandu was a stubborn young woman who could not understand why her people had chosen to live in such constant sadness. For many months, she stayed locked inside her room, sewing beautiful dresses from fabrics she dyed with bright, vibrant colors. She had grown tired of creating nothing but black garments. Her mother constantly warned her, deeply afraid that a curse would fall upon anyone who dared to break the rule. But Wandu refused to listen. She laughed softly and told her mother that fear was the only real curse that had survived in their village. "Has anyone ever truly died simply for wearing color?" she asked. Her mother sighed and then shared an old story that Wandu's late father had once told her when she was still a little girl. According to the story, many years ago, a young bride ignored the rule and wore a colorful dress on her wedding day, claiming that black was too depressing for such a joyful occasion. Despite many warnings, she proudly wore the beautiful gown. However, only a few days after the wedding, something terrible happened. Her stomach began to swell larger and larger until it eventually burst open, ending her life. The entire village was shaken with fear, and from that day forward, no one ever dared to break the rule again. For generations, the story was repeated and believed without question. But Wandu refused to live her life based on a story she did not fully understand. One morning, she stepped outside wearing the most stunning dress the village had ever seen. It shone brightly like the rising sun. The fabric carried glowing shades of red, gold, and blue that sparkled beautifully beneath the morning light. The moment the villagers saw her, the busy marketplace suddenly fell silent. Women dropped the baskets they were carrying. Men froze in the middle of their conversations. Children stared at her with wide, astonished eyes. "Wandu," someone shouted, "take off that dress before you bring destruction upon us all." But Wandu only smiled gently and continued walking. Fear spread across the village like wildfire. That same afternoon, the elders gathered together and made a difficult decision. If a curse truly came, they would not allow it to destroy everyone, so they cast her out. The villagers refused to speak to her. No one would sell her food. No one allowed her anywhere near their homes. Even her own parents, terrified of what might happen, begged her to leave. Her mother cried as she packed Wandu's belongings. "Please go before your stubbornness destroys us all," she pleaded. With a heavy heart, Wandu left the village and moved into a small, abandoned hut at the edge of the forest, where she decided to live alone. There she spent her days sewing beautiful dresses. Although loneliness weighed heavily on her heart, she still refused to believe that colors could anger the spirits the way the villagers feared. What Wandu did not know was that the days ahead would soon become the most difficult of her life. She continued working quietly inside the small hut near the forest, trying to silence the loneliness that followed her everywhere. The bright fabrics were the only things preventing her heart from completely breaking. Sometimes she would lift the cloth toward the sunlight and imagine how beautiful the village would look if its people were not so afraid of color. But barely 3 days after she left, strange and frightening events began to unfold in the village. Animals suddenly started collapsing and dying while the villagers watched in horror. Pregnant women began losing their pregnancies, sending waves of panic through the community. A trader who had been perfectly healthy the previous day suddenly began coughing up blood as a dangerous fever overtook him. Within just a few days, death quietly crept through the village as people mysteriously collapsed and died. Fear spread rapidly, and the villagers immediately blamed Wandu. "This girl has cursed us," they shouted angrily, claiming that her stubbornness had brought disaster upon them. It is because she wore color, many women whispered. The elders quickly called for an emergency meeting in the village square. This girl has brought a curse upon us, one elder declared, while the others nodded in agreement. We cannot sit and watch our village perish when we have done nothing wrong. Another elder stood and spoke with a trembling voice. If we remain silent and do nothing, this curse will wipe us all out, he warned. The spirits must be appeased. After many hours of fearful discussion, they finally reached a terrible conclusion. Wandu had to die. If she is the one who brought this curse upon us, then her blood will stop it, the chief announced. The villagers immediately grabbed sticks and marched toward the forest where Wandu had been living alone. But when they arrived at the hut, they discovered it was completely empty. There were no clothes, no fabrics, nothing. The door creaked slowly in the wind as they searched the surrounding forest for hours, shouting her name while pushing through thick bushes. But Wandu was nowhere to be found. Someone must have warned her, one villager said angrily. They returned to the village and summoned her mother. Where is your cursed daughter? They demanded. Her mother tried desperately to convince them that she did not know where Wandu had gone, but the villagers refused to believe her. They ordered that she be locked up until Wandu came out of hiding. Days passed, but no one saw or heard anything about her. Meanwhile, the misfortune continued. More people kept dying, and the fear became unbearable when news spread that the king had fallen sick. He had only taken his father's throne a few months earlier and had not yet produced an heir. The villagers feared that if the king died without an heir, the entire kingdom would fall into chaos. Terror now ruled every heart in the village. No one slept peacefully anymore. Every cough sounded like death knocking on the door. So the elders gathered once again in the village square. The village gong echoed loudly as every household came out wearing their black garments, their faces filled with dread. This is no longer a small problem, the chief priest declared. The curse is growing stronger. The villagers began shouting Wandu's name in anger. Find her! Bring her back! She must pay for what she has done. They decided to search every corner of the village. The plan was to go from house to house until Wandu was found. They warned that anyone caught hiding her would pay with their life. The chief stood before the crowd and raised his staff. Hear this decree, he announced loudly. Anyone found hiding the girl will be put to death. The words weighed heavily on everyone as the villagers began knocking on doors one by one in their search for her. Fear spread instantly through the village. Even those who secretly felt sympathy for Wandu quickly buried those feelings. No one wanted to die because of her, so the search grew even more intense. Men moved through the village like determined hunters. They forced open doors and searched through cooking huts. They checked inside storage barns and animal pens, and even climbed into the roof spaces where families kept their dried food. Every corner of the village was carefully examined, yet Wandu was nowhere to be found. Just when they were about to lose hope, Wandu suddenly walked into the village square. She was still wearing the same colorful dress that had terrified everyone before. But this time, she was not alone. Standing beside her was a tall woman dressed in bright colors the villagers had not seen for generations. The crowd immediately stepped back, whispering among themselves as they wondered who the mysterious woman was. The chief angrily stepped forward. You dare return here after everything you have done? He shouted. Wandu remained silent. Instead, the strange woman calmly stepped forward. Her voice was steady and clear as she addressed the crowd. You are all searching for the wrong enemy, she said. The villagers murmured in confusion. You accuse this girl of bringing a curse upon your land, she continued slowly, but the suffering you face today was born from your own cruelty. The chief frowned deeply. Who are you to speak to us like this? He demanded. The woman looked slowly around the village before answering. I am the descendant of the child your ancestors threw into the evil forest. The entire crowd gasped in shock, struggling to understand what she meant. She then revealed that she was the granddaughter of Omar, the queen who had once married one of their ancient kings. Long ago, she explained, there had lived in the village a beautiful maiden named Omar. She was the most beautiful woman the village had ever seen, and she captured the heart of the king. Eventually, The king married her as his final wife. At that time, the king desperately needed a male heir because all his 9 wives had given birth only to daughters. But Omar gave birth to a son. The whole village celebrated with great joy because the long-awaited heir had finally been born. The king loved Omar deeply because she had removed the shame that had followed him for years. He even called her his favorite wife. However, as time passed, the king noticed something unusual about his son. The boy had a deformity. His fingers were curved in a strange way. Soon, the villagers began whispering among themselves, believing that children born with such deformities were cursed and illegitimate. Rumors quickly spread. People accused Omar of committing an abomination against the king by bearing another man's child. They claimed she had been unfaithful. The king could not bear the shame those accusations brought upon his throne. In his anger, he decided to punish her. Omar was forced to dance through the village wearing a black dress while villagers surrounded her, chanting cruel words that shattered her heart. Her child was taken away and abandoned in the forest because the people believed he was cursed. Omar cried and begged the villagers to believe her. She swore that she had never betrayed the king. She even told them she had been a virgin before marrying him, but the people called her a liar. In the end, the king ordered that she be buried alive in the forest for dishonoring the throne. That was how everything began, the woman said. Before dying, Omar cursed the entire village. The wind seemed to pause as every villager listened in fearful silence. The woman continued, Omar swore that the land would never know peace until justice returned to the throne. She declared that the people would mourn in black until the blood they rejected returned to rule. A low murmur spread through the crowd. The sickness, the dying animals, and the suffering you see now, the woman said slowly, are not caused by color. They are signs from the ancestors, reminding you of the crime your forefathers committed. The chief priest shifted uneasily. You lie, he said weakly, though his voice lacked confidence, but the woman looked directly into his eyes. The curse will only end when Omar's bloodline returns to the throne. The villagers stared at one another in shock. How could Omar's bloodline rule again when they already had a king? Just then, word spread through the crowd that their current king had finally died from his sickness. It felt as though fate had been waiting for that very moment. The woman gently placed her hand on Wandu's shoulder. This girl you chased away, the one you tried to kill, carries the blood of Omar, the great queen whose son was meant to rule. The entire village fell silent. The child your ancestors abandoned in the forest did not die, the woman continued. A small family living deep in the forest heard his cries and rescued him. They raised him as their own and protected him from the people who wanted him dead. When he became older, the woman who saved him told him the truth about his origin. But she warned him never to return to the village that had betrayed his mother. Later, that rejected prince married the daughter of the woman who had saved him. Their descendants continued to live quietly in the forest for generations. The secret was passed down from parent to child, until one day Wandu's late father fell in love and left the forest, never revealing the hidden truth. The woman then rolled up her sleeve and showed a small birthmark on her arm. Every descendant of Omar carries this mark, she said. That is how I was able to find Wandu in the forest. Wandu slowly lifted her own sleeve, and there was the same mark. This, the woman said softly, is the bloodline you rejected. The chief priest swallowed nervously. If what you say is true, then this girl is the rightful heir to the throne, the woman finished. Fear and shame spread through the crowd. The woman then looked at Wandu. Do you remember the dream you told me about? She asked. Wandu nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. I saw a woman wearing royal beads, Wandu said softly. She stood beside a throne covered in dust and told me, Child, wear color and come home. The villagers froze. She said the land had mourned for too long, Wandu continued, and that the time for truth had finally come. Wandu slowly looked around at the village that had rejected her. That is why I wore the colorful dress, she said. I thought it was only a strange dream. The woman beside her shook her head gently. It was not a dream. It was your great-great-grandmother, Omar. A soft wind moved through the village. The chief slowly dropped his staff and fell to his knees. One by one, the elders followed. Soon the entire village knelt before Wandu. "We have sinned against your bloodline," the chief said with a trembling voice. "Only you can break this curse." The village square became completely silent as Wandu looked at the people who had once chased her away, the same people who had tried to kill her. The mysterious woman then took Wandu's hand and led her toward the palace. Hours later they arrived, and Wandu looked at the throne waiting in the distance, the throne that had waited generations for her bloodline to return. After a long moment of silence, she finally spoke. "If accepting the throne is the only way to free this land from the curse, then I will accept it." The moment those words left her lips, something extraordinary happened. A rainbow appeared in the sky above the village, the first rainbow anyone had seen in generations. No one moved. The bright colors stretched across the sky like a silent promise, glowing beautifully against the dark clouds that had hung over the land for so long. The villagers stared upward in amazement. Many of them had never seen such colors before. For generations, their world had known only black. The chief priest trembled as he lifted his eyes to the sky. "The curse has been lifted," he whispered. Wandu sat upon the throne wearing her beautiful dress. Her mother, who had been locked away by the villagers, was immediately released. When she entered the palace courtyard and saw her daughter sitting on the throne, her legs nearly gave way. For several seconds she could not speak. Tears filled her eyes as she slowly approached Wandu. "My child," she whispered with a trembling voice, "I chased you away because I was afraid." Wandu stepped down from the throne and embraced her mother tightly. In the days that followed, color finally returned to the village. The people burned their black clothes and began wearing bright garments once again. They were deeply grateful to Wandu, not only for restoring color to their land, but also for bringing back prosperity and joy. And so the villagers lived happily in a place that had once been filled with sorrow. The lesson from this story is clear. Fear and blind traditions can imprison a people for generations when no one dares to question them. The villagers suffered for many years because they believed a story without seeking the truth, allowing injustice to shape their lives. It also teaches that sometimes the person society rejects or calls a curse may be the very one destined to bring healing and change. Courage, truth, and justice have the power to break even the oldest curses, and sometimes it only takes one brave heart to bring light and color back into a world that has lived too long in darkness. I hope you enjoyed this story. Thanks for watching, and please remember to subscribe.